Imagine waking up to being filled with water, so fast and so powerful that you already get caught in its current. As you finally make it out of your house, you turn around to see completely taken over with debris and water. Fortunately, as we all live in the Bay Area, this isn't a nightmare we fear might become a reality. But for the people living in West Africa, this nightmare represents an existential threat that could happen at any moment. Due to all the flooding that was recently circulating the news, I became really curious on how much this phenomenon was happening around the world, but just wasn't talked about, which led me to West Africa. As West Africa has started to develop and urbanize its countries, flooding in the region has increased exponentially due to poor urban planning and deforestation. So which countries make up West Africa, and where are they? What is urbanization and its effects? And just how bad are these floods? West Africa is located here on the African continent near the equator, and it's made up of the 16 different nations you see on the left. These 16 nations are currently going through a process known as urbanization, which according to Britannica, is the process by which large numbers of people become permanently concentrated in relatively small areas, forming cities. As West Africa is the fastest urbanizing region in the world, we see this in two key ways. First, through mass migration from rural areas, and in general due to a population boom in West Africa. According to Worldometer, in just 40 years, West Africa's population has grown from 138 million people to 400 million people. Samuel Ansah from the Ghana Meteorological Agency finds that this poses a major problem as these developing nations and their urban planning have to account for too many factors all at once. Unfortunately, this forces countries to plan short-term instead of long-term, and many details are lost in this rush. Urbanization also means that cities start to expand as more space is required for their population and its needs. First, urban growth leads to expansion as it forces the population to adopt a city-based lifestyle, which leads to them using more resources. Gail Gormelin from the World Watch Institute finds that this leads to there being a greater demand for livestock and crops, which requires millions of acres of cropland per year. As such, the largest average rate of cropland expansion in the world was found in West Africa. According to Ama Awokadu and his team, the area covered by crops doubled, reaching a total of 22.4% of the total land surface. But what used to make up this land that was cleared out for farming? Forests. At first glance, it might be hard to imagine why deforestation leads to increased flooding, but it's more linked than these nations were able to plan for. When all these urbanizing cities started to expand, their only option was to expand outwards, which in the case of West Africa meant forests. Stephen Moufson writes that since 1975, West African forest cover has reduced by nearly 37%, with some countries like the Ivory Coast losing nearly 80% of its forests. Unfortunately, this means that one of the best deterrents for floods are slowly being wiped out. During stormy seasons, rainwater would hit leaves and evaporate directly into the air, or at least be slowed down, meaning less erosion when it hits the ground. Second, tree roots would absorb water from the soil and keep it in place so that the ground could store more water before it starts channeling down into cities, as you see on the picture to the right. The absence of these natural solutions to floods increase the impacts of flooding in two different ways. First, decrease in forest cover means that floods happen more often because it's easier for rainwater to pile up. Second, it makes otherwise inevitable floods even worse by making them last even longer. Corey Bradshaw finds that due to this, flood frequency can increase by up to 60%, and he continues that flood duration can increase by up to 16%. But why are these increased floods an issue, and how are they affecting people? With the rate at which floods are increasing, the number of people affected by floods doubles nearly every year. In 2022, the WFP finds that floods affected 3.5 million people in West Africa directly. The study continues that in just one country, Nigeria, 637,000 hectares of farmland were destroyed. To put that in perspective, that's 27 times the size of Fremont. This is a massive problem because right now in West Africa, around 43 million people are suffering from starvation and malnutrition. These increased floods destroy any chance of them gaining access to food as crops are destroyed instantly. Also, depending on the region, it means even more people can start to suffer from starvation. Outside of the people, the economy is also hit very hard. As agriculture serves as the primary driver of the economy, the countries are stripped of their ability to profit and trade resources. With nearly 3.5 million people forced out of their homes, cities are forced to keep rebuilding every flood cycle instead of progressing. As such, Mary Seraph of the World Bank finds that regions hit hardest by floods have damages exceeding $2 billion in repairs. For a developing nation, these type of costs prevent them from going and keep them stuck as a developing nation. Virtually uncovered by the news, West Africa has been silently suffering from a flooding crisis for the last 30 years. Its unique rapid urbanization requires massive amounts of land and resources, and as such, requires detailed planning. Unfortunately, as our population continues to grow exponentially, the lack of urban planning and prioritization of short-term goals has led to the destruction of forests and increased flooding. West Africa is now in a fight for its survival. With time running down, changes need to be made to the way they're urbanizing so they can put an end to